Dear Jessie, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. I missed you a lot. So finally, after a year and a half, I have this second episode of Sisterly Advice for you. It is a terrible example of your so-called role model, but I think it is an excellent example of what can be called as procrastination. I planned to share my view on education with you for the second episode, but something had happened in our life in 2020. Since it's 2022, I decided to take these back. I can't believe how time flies. We have had a tough time during the national holiday in 2020. Our grandmother departed from us one day before Mid-Autumn Festival. It was an incredible time for most families in China, but for us, it was the worst. So I decided to share something else with you. Therefore, I choose the word resilience. You said you felt disorientated when we were in our hard times together. Yes, it is disorientated. For you, for me, and for all of us. But to overcome this, I think the first thing is to allow yourself to be unhappy, stay in sorrow, or even be emotional. If you can't stop yourself from thinking about this, then just face it up. So cry when you want to do so, or write something down when you need to. We need to find ways to get this kind of feeling out of our mind and our bodies. Writing is a process of healing, and it is a method to healing our inner self. And also to love and support your mother, and for me, to love and support my father. The night before moving our grandmother's coffin to the graveyard, I slept on a double bed with your uncle in the mourning hall. Before he fell to sleep, he said, "Can you hug Daddy and put your arms on my body?" I mean, can you imagine that? We have lost our grandmother, but they have lost their mother. It is common and acceptable for us to cry and shout when we're experiencing this. And now, all these COVID-19 things have caused us so much pressure, both physically and mentally. I don't know where to start at the very beginning, and I know this will happen, but I don't want to admit that it has happened. We were stuck in sorrow for a long time, and it will be with us for our lifetime. So again, I just can't tell you how to get out of this. However, I think there might be some ways that we could learn to build our resilience together. So let me throw this out. And therefore, I choose the word resilience. It means 复原力, 韧性, or 坚韧力 in Chinese. And 3 things I want to cover for today's session. So first of all, what is resilience? Or what does a resilient person look like? And secondly, why resilience is so important? And finally, what sort of attitude we should take towards all these difficult times in our life, and how to build our own resilience. So the first question, what is resilience? Before we try to define resilience, let me ask you a question. Think about, why do some people suffer from real hardships and not flatter? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, resilience means the ability to be happy, successful again after something difficult or bad. When I told them that bad news, these were also my supervisor's words. They told me, Alex, we feel sorry for you, but this is life. We will go through this and it will build our resilience. Yes, we all know we will go through this, and resilience is something we realize we have after the fact. In management studies, resilience is also a significant body of literature. Intuitively, resilience means bouncing back. Resilience is a process that emphasizes the appraisal of feedback and experience with adaptation, by which individuals adapted to dealing with risk in their environment. So Cooper and colleagues define resilience as the ability of bouncing back from setbacks combined with remaining effective in challenging demands and difficult circumstances and growing more robust in that process. It sounds complicated, right? But don't worry. Let me explain this a bit more. Resilience is about our behavior and about how we respond to the fact, resources, and our emotional or cognitive ability to face down reality. The second question is why resilience is so important. A CEO of resilience training program once said, more than education, more than experience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. That's true in the cancer world, and it is true in the Olympics, and it is true in the ballroom. Resilience develops our propensity to make meaning of terrible times. When a bad thing happens, usually people see themselves as victims, and living through hardships carries no lesson for them. But resilient people devise construct about their suffering and to create some meaning for themselves and others. People sometimes say, why me? But I started to think and to ask, why not me? After my house was burgled in 2019. Most researchers agree on how resilient people build bridges from present-day hardship to a fuller, better constructive future. Those bridges make the present manageable, without a better word, removing the sense that present is overwhelming. This concept was beautifully articulated by Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and an Oxford survivor. In the mindset of stacking suffering, Frankl invented meaning therapy, humanist therapy techniques that helps individuals make the kind of decision that will create significance in our lives. And this is why resilience is so important, because it gives us meaning and help us to make sense of ourselves and the world, even when we are suffering from really hardship. So the third question, how could we build our own resilience? Different people have different opinions about this, but I want to emphasize 4 things or 4 simple steps. So the first step is to be positive, optimistic, and realistic. A common belief about resilience is that it stems from an optimistic nature. The rise of resilience studies is also relevant to positively and positive psychology. Sometimes we misunderstand the underlying meaning of what is optimistic or what is optimism. Practical optimism is the ability to see harsh truth and deal with them. And we need to make sure such optimism doesn't distort the sense of reality. Resilient people have very sober and down-to-earth views on those parts of reality, and that matters for survival. A question here is optimism nature or nurture? Can we train ourselves to be optimistic or think positively? The answer is yes, but there's no one best way. We could all have our own path or method towards this. A very simple change I have made is try to write down 3 things I'm grateful for every day. So these simple techniques help us look for the bright side of our life. And however, we need to be careful of the excessive positively project effect. Being positive and optimistic is the attitude we should have, but being realistic help us to overcome what we have encountered and help us to prepare for the worst that can happen. So now let's move to the second step. The second step is to face reality and bouncing forward. Try to ask ourselves, do I truly understand and accept the reality of my situation? These are good questions. Research suggested that most people slip into denial as a coping mechanism. For example, Kubler-Ross argued that when we experience change or hardship, we will encounter 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. If we accept the reality anyway, why not just train ourselves to be radically transparent and authentic to ourselves at the very beginning? Also, whatever happens, we cannot ignore the elephant in the room. Radical transparency is also what Ray Dalio mentioned in his book Principle. Bouncing forward is the phrase I took from the book Option B, written by Sheryl Sandberg. She was the Facebook's COO, now Meta, and her husband died suddenly at the age of 48 when they were having a holiday in Mexico. Just for your information, her husband was the founder of SurveyMonkey. And no matter who we are, we all need to go through this. We need to move on. We all need to move on. It might be just something tiny steps initially, but we will make it. We will, and we definitely will. When we generally stare down to reality, we prepare ourselves to act in ways that allow us to endure and survive extraordinary hardship. What we need to do now is to train ourselves on how to survive before the fact. And this is how resilience makes a difference. And the third step is to think carefully about who we are. Whom do we want to be? What is your mission? And what is our identity? In Frankl's book, he said, we must never forget that we may also find meaning in life, even when confronted with a hopeless situation, when facing a fate that cannot be changed. Throughout our entire life, we are trying to make sense of ourselves and trying to make sense of the world around us. Our identity is how we see ourselves. You might not be aware that what you do, how you act, and how you present in your daily life is the byproduct of your identity. I think we are more likely to be self-motivated if we're clear about our identity. We are more likely to be motivated by the intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. Identity is like our heart. What we are doing is like our brain. And how we are doing is like our hand. We are aiming for the trinity of heart, mind, and hand. And the fourth step is building a system to develop our own resilience. Many of the early theories about resilience suggested on the role of genetic. So it means it's nature. Some people are just born resilient. So the argument went. And it is true, but an increasing body of empirical evidence shows that resilience can be learned. Building a system for this will allow us to reflect on how specific aspects of resilience can be used in challenging situations. Couto argued that resilient people, the possess three characteristics: a staunch acceptance of reality, a depth belief, often buttressed by strongly held values, that life is meaningful, and an uncanny ability to improvise. I am not trying to give you any step-by-step guidance. As I said, we need to build a resilience system on our own, rather than look for a generic method that suits everyone. But there are two directions we could look for. Resilience results from a dynamic interaction between the inner predisposition and the external environment or the external experience. Internal predisposition refers to how to train our brains to be resilient. I think those 3 steps above gives you some hints. For external experience, I refer to how positive relationship and random act of kindness will make a difference. I will get into this further in our future episodes. Resilience has become increasingly important for individuals, organizations, and society to flourish in the uncertainty, risky, turbulent, and ambiguous world we live in today. Resilience transforms potential toxic stress into terrible stress. Our ultimate goal is to reframe a basic human adaptational system that will allow you to stop, rest, and recover. These 4 steps sound simple and easy, but they might be full of obstacles when it comes to practice. We might have a chance to get into details in the future, but that's it for today. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again hopefully in 2 weeks, and if not, in 1 month's time. We will both grow and learn from this and build our resilience to make us wrecked and robust in the future. So I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.